Welcome to AnaJet University Online. My name is Tim Belante and I'm going to be your instructor throughout this video. We're always encouraged when our customers come here to join us for training, and also when they watch this video. It's always telling us that you guys care about your product. You made a huge investment in your product and we want to know that you're going to be able to operate it properly. So thank you for joining us. We're really encouraged by that. So throughout this video we're going to have 4 different sections. We're going to have our intro section, we're going to have a white shirt section, we're going to have a dark shirt section, and we're also going to have a maintenance section. So thank you for joining us, and we're looking forward to having a great time together. When it comes to your technical support team here at AnaJet, no task is too big or too small for us to tackle. If you ever feel stuck, and we don't ever want that feeling from you, please give us a call or send us an email. We're available Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. Pacific time. Remember, when you bought your AnaJet printer, you also got lifetime tech support with that. So we're always here to support you. So let's get started with our intro section. First thing I want to talk about is print resolution. Our printer can start off at 600 dpi and go all the way up to 1200 dpi. And regarding your graphics, when it comes to your graphics and preparing your graphics, you want to start at least 100 dpi. When I say dpi, I'm saying dots per inch. You want to have your graphics all the way up to 300 dpi as well. If you go above 300 dpi, you're looking at hard drives that are going to fill up faster, and your RIP times are going to be increased dramatically. Also keep in mind that we're only printing on t-shirts. We're not printing on photo papers, so your shirts can only hold up to 300 dpi resolution as it is. Also keep in mind, graphics that you might pull off the internet are usually going to be a low resolution. They're going to be somewhere around 72 dpi. These graphics will not print as well as something that's a higher resolution. You might see something that's more of a jagged edge across your graphics instead of a nice clean line. So keep that in mind. Understand your graphics and understand where they're coming from and how strong they are for you. All right, so let's start talking about the printable area of the printer. The print table is 14 inches by 18 inches. We can print 14 inches across, or we can print 18 inches across, depending on where we hang the collar of the shirt. So always keep that in mind. If you have a bigger client, maybe they're using a XXX or a quad X, you can always hang that shirt across 18 inches, increase that graphic for them on the fly, by the way. It's the beauty of digital. You can always increase the file and the graphic size in your RIP software to any size that you want, so long as it's within the 14 by 18 inch table that we print with. Here at AnaJet, we've always been proud of our commitment towards the environment. We use only water-based inks and pretreatments. They can be used on anything from infants to adults, and we have all the MSDS sheets available upon request through the tech support team. All right, so something very important we always want to talk about, and that's printing environment. When it comes to your printing environment, there's 2 factors. Number 1 is temperature, and number 2 is your humidity. So let's talk about temperature. You want your operating temperature to be anywhere from 61 to 90 degrees. My rule of thumb has always been, if I'm comfortable in the room, it's more likely that my AnaJet's comfortable in the room as well. Temperatures below 61 can lead to sluggish ink. Temperatures that are above 90 can lead to ink that's a little more thinned out. So 61 to 90 degrees is your optimal setting for your temperatures. But even more important than temperature is humidity. And let's talk about humidity. Why is it so important? If you think about it, we're using water-based inks. And with water-based inks that's firing out of a printhead in picoliters, that printhead is now exposed to the air that's surrounding it. And if that air happens to be dry, those nozzle plates can slowly start to dry out. And one of the symptoms that you'll see when it comes to this is banding. Your first 2-3 prints might come out brilliant. Your 4th print, you see a little bit of a band. Your 5th print, you see it starting to get worse. And by the 6th, 7th print, it might drop out completely. This is a dead-on indication that your humidity levels are too low. So what is too low? We're talking anywhere below 45%. And when it comes to 45%, that's a magic number, but I don't want it to be your goal. 45% is a bare minimum. If you can get it above 45%, we definitely recommend that. So anywhere from 45% to 80% humidity is exactly where you want your operating environment for your printer. So let's talk about some of the tools that are needed to help us control our printer environment. First thing you're going to want is a hygrometer. Hygrometers are used to help us read the humidity levels in any room or any environment. Right now I happen to be at 55%, which is perfect. I can operate in this environment all day long. Next tool you're going to need is a humidifier, if necessary. When it comes to the type of humidifier that you use, it's very important to understand that we want a non-misting evaporative humidifier. If we bought a humidifier from the pharmacy section at Target or Walmart, you're going to probably deal with a humidifier that's emitting a mist into the air, and the last thing we want is moisture and the electronics of your printer meeting. So make sure that when you do buy that humidifier that it is an evaporative type of humidifier. When you put your hand over the vent of that humidifier, your hand should never feel any sort of moisture whatsoever, although it is putting humid air into the environment. Depending on the climate that you live in, you may not need a humidifier at all, but the hygrometer is going to be the one that dictates that or not. If your environment doesn't call for a humidifier, if your hygrometer is saying you're always above 45%, no need to purchase a humidifier. But maybe you're in a dry climate, somewhere like Nevada, Arizona, something that's a lot drier, you're going to need to put moisture in that air to make sure that those picoliters of ink that are firing out of that print head are not going to dry up as you're printing. Now let's talk about some of the computer requirements for your mPower. First off, we do support all Windows operating systems, anywhere from Windows XP all the way up to Windows 8. You also need at least 1 GB of memory on your computer. Very minimum requirements. Next up is your software. Every printer comes with its own AnaRIP software. The AnaRIP software is available online. You'll obtain that on our AnaJet Tech Support website. When it comes to your AnaJet mPower software, the only thing you really need is the AnaRIP software that comes free with every printer. There's no need to use any Windows driver. There's no drivers involved whatsoever. Once you've installed the AnaRIP software, there's 2 different ways to rip your file to the printer. Number 1 is if you have a direct connection via USB cable, you'll rip the file from the RIP software over to the printer. That job will then show up on your control panel and you're ready to print that file. The next way is to rip directly to a USB drive or an SD card, and in which case you can plug those into the control panel, pull up your file, and then you're ready to print that file. When it comes to your graphic design software, you're going to need it to be able to do 2 different things for you. Number 1, convert a graphic from CMYK over to RGB. We always encourage you guys to use the RGB color spectrum as it's the most broad spectrum available for you. Number 2 thing you're going to want that software to do is create transparencies for you. Without transparencies, you're going to end up with graphics that are just a block print. You're not going to want prints that look that way. It's a lot less attractive and it's a lot more ink that's going to be used on your part. So to be able to create transparencies with your design software is optimal. Now, a lot of people use Photoshop, and I also lead people to Photoshop Elements. Photoshop is obviously a much more expensive way to go. Photoshop Elements, you can pick it up for about $80 at any store, maybe like a Costco or a Target. Very cheap alternative to Photoshop. It'll do everything you need it to do. There's 2 stages to powering on your AnaJet mPower. The first is located in the back. Make sure you turn this one on first. This is powering up the main power supply of the printer. The second is the power button located on the control panel. You'll find it on the right-hand side. The second I hit this powers up the operating system of the printer. Once the operating system is booted up, you'll see that the table's moved out now, and we'll gain access to the control panel and navigate through it. In order to navigate through the control panel, we have up, down, and left and right arrows. And you can see just by moving and clicking these buttons, I can navigate easily through the control panel. We also have a series of buttons around the arrow buttons, and I usually like to start here at 12 o'clock. It's our menu button. Once I click on menu, I have many different options to choose from. Print head clean, adjust table height, maintenance functions, printer settings, ink levels, really important, diagnostics, firmware timestamp, update applications, and update board firmware. So that's my main menu button. All right, in pressing the Jobs button, I can see where I can choose from where all my jobs are going to be coming from. The top option is my internal storage. This is the 8 GB of memory that comes with the printer. Anytime I rip a file directly from a laptop or a computer, this is where those files will be stored. The other options are using a USB drive. Simply plug it into the side of the control panel here. You'll scroll down with the down arrow to front USB. We also have a back USB that's available. So once I have the front USB highlighted, I'll hit enter. I see a list of files that are already ripped for me. I'll scroll down to one of them, click enter, and now I see a thumbnail preview of the graphic that I just ripped. The next button I want to discuss is the Nozzle Check. It is so important that we actually created a button for it, and you'll see it here at the 7 o'clock position. So once I click on Nozzle Check, we see a preview of where to place the paper. Just get a blank piece of white paper, place it down in the corner, and once you've clicked Nozzle Check, you'll see that your green ready light is lit up. Once you see it lit up, click the print button, and that'll start the process of the Nozzle Check. You'll see the table go in. One of the unique features on the AnaJet mPower is the automatic table height adjustment. Whenever we're printing different styles of garments, whether it's sweaters, hoodies, t-shirts, handkerchiefs, they all have different thicknesses to their substrates. So this is where the table height adjustment is going to help you. The idea is to try to get the print heads as close to the table without causing an obstruction error. So first thing you're going to do is put your garment onto the table. Once you've got that garment onto the table, go ahead and hit that height button located at 6 o'clock on the control panel. First thing you'll see after this is the table will lower. It'll go as low as it can go. Once it's lowered all the way, it'll start to go inside the printer, and then you'll start to see it raise. It'll eventually break the plane of that laser that you see going across left to right. Once it breaks that plane, now you have your optimal table height set. Located underneath the table, you'll see that there's a knob to micro adjust your table either up or down. Turn it clockwise to go up, turn it counterclockwise to go down. Again, this is just for micro adjustments that you might need to do along the way. Okay, so now I want to demonstrate how the cancel button works on the printer. Let's suppose you've loaded a shirt and you hit print, and I'll demonstrate this here for you right now, but maybe you realize, oh my gosh, I put the wrong size on for this specific graphic, or I put the wrong colored shirt on. Simply hit the cancel button and you'll see that the table's just going to come right back out. This was not a wasted shirt. No ink was deposited on it. The head never even made it across the table, so we saved this shirt. If you are in the middle of a print, you can still hit the cancel button, although you may still have some lines that were printed on the shirt. So don't be surprised if you do see that printed out on your shirt after you hit the cancel button. Use a level to determine if your printer is flat. To do this, place a level on the center of the carriage bar for left to right adjustment. For front to back adjustment, place the level behind the print table parallel to the rail the table moves on. To adjust the printer, lower or raise the 6 rubber feet found on the bottom. The next thing I want to demonstrate is the obstruction sensor that's installed on your printer. The obstruction sensor is built in to help protect your print heads against any head strikes that could occur. In this case, I have a wrinkle that I've purposely put in this shirt. So let me hit the print button and let me show you how this actually operates. So once I hit the print button, we have a laser that goes across the shirt, and you'll see it actually detected that wrinkle for me. That wrinkle was too high. In other words, the print head would have struck that wrinkle. So we've saved our print heads from any damage. We've also saved our shirts from any damage. So very easy to clear this. You'll see the obstruction error. It'll say obstruction detected. Please clear obstruction, and then press print. So simple. This is just a wrinkle. So all I need to do is work that wrinkle out by pulling the edges of that shirt. Now you see no more wrinkle. I'll click OK and hit the print button again. And now this time we're going to have a successful print. All right, so when it comes to some standard printing procedures, the AnaRIP software supports many different file types, starting off with JPEG, TIFF, PNG, PDF, PSD, which is an Adobe Photoshop file, AI, which is an Adobe Illustrator file. And these file types serve different functions. Some we would encourage you to use, some we would probably discourage you from using. Number one, JPEG. Now JPEGs can be used in many different operations. A lot of your digital cameras are taking photos with JPEGs. Now if it's a high resolution JPEG, something where it's 3,000 by 5,000 pixels, but it's only 72 dpi, feel free to use that file. The pixel density is so intense on that file that we can not lose any resolution whatsoever. However, if it's a JPEG that's 72 dpi, as I mentioned earlier, you might see some jagged edges on your graphics that shouldn't be there at all. Looks good on your screen, but as we print it out, and it would be true with any printer that you print that graphic out on, you would see jagged edges. So what we always encourage are two different file types. Number one, PNG, and number two, TIFF. Now both do the same thing. They both support transparencies, And it's a personal choice between you whether you want to use one or the other. Sometimes a PNG is a smaller file type, sometimes a TIFF is a little bit bigger, but they both serve the same function. Let me give you an example of one. Now this is a print that we used, and obviously it has a transparent area, and I can tell only because I have open areas in my graphic. In other words, the t-shirt is doing all the work for me. I didn't print black ink on here. If it was a JPEG and I happened to print it on this shirt, I would see this black block surrounding the graphic. Not a very attractive print. So I always encourage, if you have the use for transparencies or a need for it, definitely go with TIFF or PNG as your file types. All right, so when it comes to the substrates that we're printing on, we always recommend at least starting at 100% cotton. Cotton is going to yield the best results possible for your AnaJet. And why is that? It's because our water-based inks were developed specifically for natural cotton fibers. You can also use hemp or bamboo. Rule of thumb for me, I've always said it, if it grows from the ground, you're going to get the best results out of it. You can also do cotton blends where you're using 50-50, 50% cotton, 50% polyester. Now, one thing to expect is your colors will fade or look a little bit washed out on your 50-50 blends. Reason that the 50-50 shirts will look a little bit washed out is because the ink is literally only sticking to 50% of that shirt. Guess what 50%? That's right, cotton. The other 50% of the polyester, the ink was not developed to stick to. So you're only going to see 50% of the possible results in your blended shirts. Now you can also print up to 100% polyester. Now how do you do this? Simply apply our poly pretreatment to the substrate that you're going to print on. Now there's a couple criteria involved with this. Number one, it has to be a light polyester. Anything from the pastel range of colors on to white. The reason is that as we stand today in directed garment printing, there is no white ink that will work with a polyester. So any dark garments that you're looking for white ink to be involved with a polyester, it's not going to happen for you. So apply that poly pretreatment to the light polyesters, and you can use the same inks that you use for cottons all day long. When it comes to your heat press settings, there's two different settings involved. Number one, 356 degrees for 40 seconds. This covers all shirts that are using CMYK inks only. The second setting is 330 degrees for 90 seconds. This covers your dark shirts where white ink is involved. Unique thing about this setting though is it covers both shirts. You can do that for CMYK shirts or for shirts with white ink involved, which is great if you're doing a run where you're doing light shirts and dark shirts all day long. No need to change your heat press settings constantly throughout the day to adjust for light and dark shirts. However, if you're doing light shirt printing only, there's a 50-second difference in the timing, so why have that part of your production? Cut 50 seconds out of your time, use the 356 degrees for 40 seconds on your light shirts only. Also, when it comes to your poly blends, make sure that you contact tech support, have them walk you through the steps on how to cure that properly. The last thing we want to do is create a fire or scorch your shirts or your garments under the heat press using the improper settings. In order for your garments to survive wash cycles time and time again, it is absolutely important to make sure that your heat press is set to the proper settings. But let's suppose we set our temperature for 330 degrees. There's really no way to verify whether or not you're actually at 330 degrees on the heat element of your heat press. But with the proper tool, we can do this. The proper tool would be a laser thermometer. You can get these at Home Depot or Lowe's, any home improvement center. Simply point the laser at the heat element of your heat press. This will give you a proper readout of the temperature that's actually coming off of your heating element. Oftentimes, you'll see that a heat press is not actually at 330 degrees. It might be even warmer, or it might even be cooler. You may also find some cool spots on your heating element. If you do that, you may want to contact the heat press manufacturer. Now, on top of temperature, we also have pressure. We recommend a medium pressure. There are some heat presses out there that have dials that will actually tell you what your pressure's at. Normally, they're rated anywhere from 1 to 10. So, if that's the case for you, put it right in the middle. Put it right there at 5, and that's your medium pressure. One of the rules I've always gone by, if you don't have a dial for pressure on your heat press, is to simply test it with your physical strength. If you can press your heat press down and clamp it down with 2 fingers on each hand, you're probably a little on the light side. However, if I have to stand on top of my heat press to clamp it down, I'm probably way too high on my pressure. This is a brief recap. All right, so let's discuss some of the web resources that we have available on AnaJet.com. I'm going to go ahead and open up my web browser here. And you'll see our homepage is just at AnaJet.com. From here, if you just type in AnaJet.com/new, we have a whole page that's available here for you with many resources and many different tools that you guys are going to find very useful. For me, one of the best tools that I have here is your return on investment calculator. If you click on this, it's an Excel spreadsheet. You'll go ahead and click open, and once you open that up, you'll see a spreadsheet that you can input all your numbers and values for how much you're going to spend on ink, how much you spend on your printer, and eventually how much you're going to charge per shirt. And it'll give you a really good cost analysis and give you the best option and best idea on when you're going to get your return on your investment for your printer. We also have some brochure templates that are available here for you, and we have some invoice templates that are also available. Now, if we go back to the home page, I want to introduce you to the tech support site. Tech support can be found at the top navigation panel here. Go ahead and click on tech support, and from here, you'll use your login account. So I'm going to log in here. Enter my password. And from here, we have many different resources that are available for our customers. We can edit your account information, so if you need to update your email addresses or home addresses or business address, you can do that. Frequently asked questions, tips and tricks, and some techniques that we have available here for you. Program download. This is where you'll be able to download any RIP software updates or any firmware updates for your mPower. We also have some graphic samples up here. These are very high resolution graphics. I think they're all at least 300 dpi and available in different file formats. So go ahead and download those and use those as some good test files for you. We have some good video lessons on the training and technical aspects of the printer. So feel free to go through that if you feel that there's something we haven't covered here today. Sales tools, this is your custom brochures. You can input your company name as you see fit. And we have some good troubleshooting documents. So if there's anything you come across through a tech call, you can download those forms right here. And the next thing we have is our recorded webinars. We have these available. These were pre-recorded and they were live at one point. And the great thing about joining us on a live webinar is you can use the Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions, you can ask the instructor specifically your issue or your question. So that's a great way to get your answers on the fly. And then finally, the last page I want to lead you to is our online forums. If we go back to the AnaJet homepage, and again, at the top navigation panel, you'll find a user forum right here. Go ahead and click on that link. And you'll see we have different categories here available for you. And this is a great way that our customers share information with each other, share ideas on what they're printing, how they're printing, how much you're selling their shirts for, how their business is doing. Again, it's a really good resource for our AnaJet customers to share information back and forth with each other. So I definitely encourage you guys to sign up for this, as you get a lot of good information from each other. All right, so hopefully by now we have the printer up on the table, we have it leveled off, we have the ink loaded in properly, and so the next thing we need to do is download the RIP software from the AnaJet website. So let's double click on our browser on my desktop here, and here we are at AnaJet.com. So at the top, I want you to go ahead and click on the tech support link here. Make sure that you get registered first. If you haven't registered your printer yet, go ahead and click on the link right here. Click here to register, and you'll see the form pop up on the window. Go ahead and fill this form out completely, and when you're done, go ahead and click the register button at the bottom. Once that's done, you'll get an email from AnaJet stating that your warranty registration has been approved, and once it's been approved, you'll be able to download anything from our website. So let's go back to the tech support site. We have our username, which is your email address. I'll put mine in here. And my password. And now I'm logged into the AnaJet Tech Support website. from here, go ahead and go to the left-hand panel here. You'll see Program Download. Go ahead and click on that link, and then from here you'll see the different software versions for MP5 and also the MP10. Make sure that if you have an MP10 that you indeed download this version. If you have an MP5 and download the MP10 RIP, it won't work. So make sure you download the proper software for the version or the model of printer that you actually have. So go ahead and click on the link, and I'm going to say Save down here, and you'll see the download start to happen. It's a very small file. Then from here, go ahead and click Run. The installation process will start. Just go ahead and keep hitting that Next button until the process is done. And once it's done, what you'll see on your desktop is this icon of a t-shirt. Mine is for the MP10. So that's all there is to installing the RIP. Very important to get those printers registered. Without registration, remember, you can't download anything from our website. When it comes to establishing communication, if you have communication errors between your computer and your mPower, it's probably going to be one of three different things. Number one, your USB cable is simply not plugged in. So make sure you look at both ends of that cable on your printer side and your computer side and make sure that those are plugged in properly. Number two, your USB cable could be too long. If it's over 10 feet long, we could be losing communication between the devices. So just make sure you use the cable that came with the printer. You should have no communication errors. And number three, of course, make sure the power for the printer is on. You have two power switches on your AnaJet. Number one is the one in the back that powers on the power supply. Number two, you have your power button on your control panel. So make sure those are both on. Make sure the carriage and table retainers are removed before you power up the machine. These are both located underneath the lid. Turn on the main power switch located in the back of the printer. Press the power key located on the control panel. Watch the machine power up and confirm that you see the AnaJet flash screen and the display initialize. The control panel should show the jobs menu when finalized and ready to print. Also confirm that during the power up stage, you see the printhead carriage move to the right and then back to its home position, along with the print table moving out to its home position. Confirm that the wiper blade is functioning properly by pressing the menu button, then scroll down to Maintenance Functions, and press the Enter key. Scroll down to Wipe Print Nozzles and press Enter. Open the lid, look to the left side of the table and confirm that the wiper blade is moved to the engaged position in front of the printhead carriage. The print carriage will move to the right across the wiper blade and travel all the way to the other side of the printer. The wiper blade should then move back to its home position, followed by the printhead carriage. If any of these functions are not operating, or you're not sure if they are, please contact technical support for assistance. Your printer was shipped with cleaning solution in the ink delivery system to prevent it from drying out. This solution must be removed prior to filling the printer with ink. Do not install any ink cartridges at this time. The ink delivery system for the mPower printers utilize full circulation for the white ink channels, thus uses two sets of tubes known as a print side and purge side. To remove the cleaning solution from the printer, the purge side must be flushed first. To do this, press Menu, scroll down to Maintenance Functions, press the Enter key, then select Startup Fill, and press Enter key. Select Fill Purge Lines, and press Enter. Be sure that the white lines, number 1 and 2, are both selected showing the word On. Select Fill for 60 seconds, then press the Enter key. You will see a 60-second countdown next to the fill time selection. Once this is completed, you will need to repeat the process again for another 60 seconds. This should have adequately removed cleaning solution from the purge tubes. Please note that the purge tubes are only used for white ink channels. Cleaning solution now needs to be removed from the print side. This will include white and CMYK colors. Select Exit from the Fill Purge Lines menu. Now select Fill Print Lines and press Enter key. Select Fill for 30 seconds and press Enter. When completed, select Fill for 30 seconds one more time. This should have adequately cleared the print lines. Inspect your print and purge lines and make sure there's no signs of cleaning solution. If so, repeat the purge and print fill functions one more time at lower time intervals. It is common to see bubbles and small gaps still in the lines. They do not need to be perfectly clear and empty. You can now install your ink cartridges one at a time. The control panel should read "Not found" when an ink cartridge is not installed. Place one cartridge at a time in its corresponding slot in the ink bag. When a cartridge is installed, the control panel should read "Good" for that specific color. If a cartridge is installed wrong, the control panel will read "Mismatch." Once each cartridge has been installed properly, you will see "Good" for every color. If the display does not read "Good," try removing the cartridge and put it back in. If an ink channel is not reading "Good," you should contact AnaJet Tech Support right away. Make sure the white ink cartridges are gently shaken a few times before installing. The white ink cartridges should be removed and shaken a few times a week to help prevent pigment separation. The white ink purge tubes need to be filled first. Select Fill Purge Lines from the Startup Fill menu. Then select Fill for 60 seconds and press Enter. It is okay to open the top cover of the printer and confirm that the ink is moved towards the printhead carriage at this time. Once the 60-second fill is completed, you will need to repeat the fill for another 60 seconds. You can confirm that the white purge lines are filled by opening the cover and viewing the white tubes inside the printhead carriage. Looking through the mesh, you can see that the front set of tubes are connected to the printheads. The white will be on the far right. You should see white ink inside those front tubes. The tubes do not need to be full, but some white ink should be visible inside them. The two 60-second fills should be adequate to fill ink in the purge lines. You now need to fill the print lines by selecting Fill Print Lines and pressing Enter. Select Fill for 30 seconds and press Enter. Once again, open the top cover and confirm the ink is moved towards the printhead carriage. You should see the ink move down into the carriage, and then you will need to inspect the tubes from the front of the carriage. All the tubes should look full with no gaps. If any gaps are visible, you need to repeat the fill with a smaller time interval until the lines are filled with no gaps. Running the fill 30 seconds twice should fill the lines completely, but may result in some wasted ink. Let the printer sit for 2 minutes and allow the ink to settle on the lines. Once 2 minutes have passed, you will need to inspect the lines again for any gaps. If you notice any gaps in the lines, run the print or purge fill at the shortest time increment. With the printer now completely filled with ink, press the cancel key until you are at the Maintenance Functions menu. Then select Wipe Printhead Nozzles and press Enter. This will wipe off the printheads and remove any ink from the maintenance station. Alright, so when it comes to understanding the health of your printer and the printheads within it, we need to perform nozzle checks. Now, nozzle checks are going to be part of your daily maintenance. Every day that you're going to be with the printer, you're going to perform this nozzle check. Now, how important are nozzle checks in your life when it comes to your printer? It's actually so important that we created a button for it specifically on our control panel. This is an example of a nozzle check. You can see I have my pattern of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. We also have two whites that print out directly onto the black table so you can see a good contrast in how strong your white inks are. Now, why are nozzle checks so important? They're actually showing us the health of our printhead at that very moment. And if we see lines or gaps in our nozzle checks, that's a poor nozzle check. If you find that you have a poor nozzle check, there is a remedy, and that's to perform a head clean. Head cleans can be found by pressing the menu button on your control panel, and it's actually the first item listed. Go ahead and hit the Enter button, find that there's 3 different head cleans that you can perform. Number 1 is by doing all white channels, or just one specific white channel, or another. You'll see that there's 2 available to choose from. You can perform a head clean on either one of those at the same time, or segregate one over the other. The other 2 head cleans you could perform are number 1, the light head clean, or a heavy head clean. A light head clean will clean all 6 print heads. In the case of an MP10, if you have an MP5, it'll clean all 3 heads at the same time. The next one is, of course, heavy. This is just a longer procedure. The same process is being used. If your nozzle check is poor after your first head clean, always feel free to go ahead and perform a second head clean, followed by another nozzle check. Now keep in mind, if you go too far, you can do too many head cleans to the point where you're actually creating a foaming action inside the print head. So if that's the case, you're actually going to see your print heads become more and more poor as we do more and more head cleans. So if that happens, let the printer settle down. Let the foaming action go away. Let it sit for a good 10 to 15 minutes. Come back and just perform a nozzle check without any head cleaning. And hopefully by that time, you have good results in your nozzle check. So let's go ahead and double click on that t-shirt icon and we'll get the RIP software started. So first thing I want you to take notice of is that we have our rulers on the top side and the left side here. We have our 14 by 18 table that's represented right here. This is the printable area. So anytime you drag a graphic in here or load a graphic into here, this is the area that you'll position it in. So we also have a grid, and I'll show you later how to change the grid if you so please, but you can see right now it's in 1 by 1 inch boxes, so makes it easy for lining up. So the first thing we need to do is understand how to load a graphic into the RIP software. There's two different ways to go about doing this. The first is by clicking on File and then going down to Place Image. And then from here I can load any graphic in that I want. Let's go ahead and load the motorcycle rider. Okay, so that's one way to do it. My favorite way though is to actually just double click on my folder where my graphics are located. Find your graphic of choice and then literally just drag and drop it into there. In this case, it's asking me, do I want to save my design first? I'm going to say no, and I'll talk about saving designs here shortly. Okay, so very easy to load the graphics in. Again, my favorite way is really just to drag and drop. So with that said, let's go ahead and expand the window here. And I want to start talking about the RIP software from this area right here, from our top right section. So the first thing we're looking at is our view. Right now I have just color layer selected, but I also have true view or color and true view. So let's go ahead and click on color and true view. Okay, so not much of a difference between these two graphics. The only thing that I can really see that's going on here is one has a grid behind it and the other one doesn't have a grid behind it. So your right hand side is your true view, or your left hand side is your color. The True View section is giving us a preview of what our graphic is going to look like printed on a white t-shirt. I know that because I have my textile color right here selected as white. So let's suppose I want to see what this graphic looks like if I print it on a yellow shirt. Just go ahead and click on that box right there and your color picker will come up. I'll just go over here and select a nice light yellow and click OK. And now you can see how the colors have shifted. That shift is simply because of the substrate that we're printing on. With CMYK ink, it is semi-transparent, so it will create a shift. One of the best ways I've been able to help customers understand this concept is if you can imagine just having a white sheet of construction paper and then a dark blue piece of construction paper, and you overlap them on top of each other. Then after you've done that, simply just take a red Sharpie, just a red marker, and then draw a line going from the white sheet of paper over to the dark blue sheet of paper. And you'll see immediately what happens to that vibrant red. On the white sheet, it's a vibrant red, but as soon as you go to that dark blue, now it's a complete shift. It's almost a black, I would guess. And that shift is only because of the substrate that we drew on in the case of t-shirts, the t-shirt choice of color that we used. So this is a really strong tool for understanding when you're going to need to use white ink or when you're not. In some cases, this color to me is more than acceptable. I think I could get a good print out of this. However, if I wanted the colors as vibrant as they are on the left-hand side on my right, well, that's where your white ink will need to be enabled. And we'll talk about white ink later in our dark shirt section. But I just want to explain what the textile color and the True View are doing for us. The question was often asked, how do I know when I need to use white ink? Well, this gives you a good understanding. If I click on this color picker for my textile color and I go to red, well, then I can see it's an obvious choice. There's no other option but to use white ink. And I choose the white ink by enabling that white ink box. So now let's change it to just one more different color here, maybe something more on a beige, more of a tan color. So you can see even there, that's still a really good looking print. I can sell that print all day long without even having to use white ink. The old rule of thumb used to be if it's a pastel shirt or lighter, you could probably get away without having to use white ink. So this is a really strong tool, TrueView, to help you understand how your CMYK inks are going to shift based on the color of the substrate that you're printing on. TrueView is also going to be a strong tool for us later on when we talk about the dark shirts. and how we change our underbase settings. So we'll get to that very soon. So with all that said, let's go down to change our color back to a white, and I'll change my view back to the color layer. So first thing you'll see in the printer section here, we're going to talk about the print settings tab first, is our model. Hopefully if you have an MP10, you should see MP10 here. If you don't, if you see MP5, then you've downloaded the wrong version of the RIP software, so make sure you have the correct version. So the next item down is our platen size. As you can see, we have our default table represented here, our main table at 14 by 18 inches. We also have our pocket left and pocket right adapters, and we also have our sleeve and youth tables represented. So if I click on sleeve table, you'll see we have a representation of that sleeve table, which is 4 inches by 16.8. And the youth table, a little bit smaller than the standard table, 8.5 by 12. These are add-on accessories that you can purchase from AnaJet after you've made your purchase for your printer. These are just accessories to add on to the table that's currently there. So let's go ahead and load that graphic back in of the turtle. I'm just going to drag and drop that in there again. So that's your platen sizes. We also have quality modes that are available. We have draft, speed, fine, and super fine that are available. We have our draft mode at 600 by 300 dpi. Your speed, you'll be at 600 by 600 dpi. Fine will be 1200 by 600 dpi. And super fine is just almost a more dramatic version, a high-def version of the fine setting. If you happen to have any missing nozzles in your nozzle checks, that super fine setting will help compensate for it, especially on graphics where you might have solid blocks of color. The super fine setting will come in very handy for you. We also have our variable dot range. We have two different options here that are available. We have wide and narrow. Narrow is selected by default, and this is the good default setting for t-shirts and anything that's maybe more thin than a t-shirt, something like a handkerchief, or suppose, let's say, I've had customers that are printing on pillowcases. Those are a little bit thinner substrate. However, if you're printing on something that's more thick, like a hoodie sweatshirt, the wide drop size might be the alternative for the color saturation that you're going to be looking for. If I go to a wide setting on a t-shirt, I might get some bleed out. So do your own testing with this on some test shirts and see how those actually work with each other. If you go to a wide setting again on a t-shirt, you might see lines that start to bleed that should be nice and crisp. So if that's the case, just go back to narrow, which is, again, the default setting. Next item down, we have copies, number of copies. By default, it's listed at 1. If I put 100 in here, this is just simply a countdown. This is not really any sort of way that the RIP software is creating 100 copies of the RIP file. It's just a simple countdown for you to understand where you are in your number of production for your shirts. All right, so the next item down, we have bidirectional color printing. By default, this is checked. This means that the printhead will fire while it's going to the left and while it's going to the right. If I uncheck this, that'll mean that the printhead will only fire in one direction. When it goes the opposite direction, it will not fire. So what this ends up doing is it adds twice as much time to your printing. Now, it slows production down, but it does get you one thing, and that's much more sharper prints if you needed that as an option. I usually use this in situations where I have graphics that might have fonts that are in a 6-point to 8 to 10-point area. When fonts are that fine, it's very difficult for the printer to be able to drop those dots in the exact same location while it's going to the left and to the right. But if it's only going in one direction when we have this unchecked, it'll hit that target the same every time and give you a little bit more sharpness and crispness to your prints. All right, so down from there, we're going to talk about our sizing and positioning. We size the graphic in two different ways. We can size it in scaling, or we can size it by actual measurement in inches, or in some cases centimeters or millimeters, depending on where you are, and we'll show you that in the Preferences tab. So let's go ahead and scale this down in percentage to 50%. I just type in the number 50 in that section and click Apply, And now you see that the graphic has changed to a 50% scale. And notice as I change these numbers that whatever I put on the left side or the right side remains the same. And that's because this box is checked. That's making sure that my graphic stays in its regular aspect ratio. If I uncheck this, now I can change this number to be anything I want, and then the number on the opposite side will not change. So now that when I click apply, you can see that I've made my graphic fatter. And I can also manipulate this graphic by using my cursor and my mouse. If I go over here on the top right, you'll see a little handle. And I can drag that any way I want to make this graphic either fat or skinny. Okay. Now to get it back to where I was, there's no undo button on the RIP software, but all you really have to do is just check that box again, and you'll see that the graphic now goes back to its normal aspect ratio. So that's scaling. Your sizing, maybe your customer's got a request where they want it exactly 10 inches across. Simply put in the number 10 and click apply. And you'll see now that we have a graphic that's exactly 10 inches across. Next item down is our position. The position is all going to be based off the top left axis of the print table represented here on the screen. So if I type in 0 and 0 and click apply, you'll see that now I'm butted up against the far left of the table and the far top side of the table. So maybe I want to position this graphic exactly 2 inches from the left. I'll type in the number 2 and click apply. And I want it exactly 2 inches from the top. I'll click in the number 2 again and click apply. And now this graphic is positioned exactly where I've told it to be positioned. Pretty easy to do. So the next item is our rotate tool. You can see we can rotate the graphic either way in 45-degree angles. If you need to go at any other angle, you might want to manipulate your graphic in something like Photoshop or Photoshop Elements. So this is only strictly 45 degrees. The great thing about this is that we can print 18 inches across now. So normally we have our shirt collar hanging off the 14-inch side right here. But if I turn this 45-degree at the 45-degree angle, now I'm printing 18 inches across, as you can see here, and I'll be hanging my collar off the opposite side. So let's rotate that back to where it was. And then we have our centering buttons. You can see this is our horizontal centering button and our vertical center button. If I take this off center right here and click my horizontal center button and then my vertical, you can see now I have my graphic perfectly positioned in the center of our 14 by 18 inch table. So that's the scaling and positioning section. Okay, so now let's talk about the next tab over from print settings. Let's talk about the color adjustments tab. Go ahead and click on that and you'll see we have color controls. And we have full control of brightness, contrast, and saturation here. So one great thing about our RIP software is that you can see a live preview of how your graphic changes based on what your slider options are here on your brightness. So let's take brightness up a little bit and see what happens to this turtle. Okay, so some of the colors start getting washed out a little bit. A little bit more vividness in things like reds and blues. So this is all about experimenting on your end of the deal. So what I found with this RIP software is that we have our ICC profile dialed in so tightly right now that what you see on the screen is very close to what you're going to get in your print. Now, of course, what you see on your screen is going to be a little bit different because we're looking at RGB pixels and we're looking at a backlit screen as opposed to CMYK ink that's deposited on a white garment with ambient light bouncing off of it. So it's not going to be an exact representation, but it's going to be very close for what you're looking for. But if you're not quite happy with the results of the default setting, one thing I always have our customers do is to experiment and try different things. So scale your graphic down. And I'm going to scale it down by grabbing the handle here. And I'm going to position it here at the top left a little bit. And then I would print that graphic at a default setting. And then leave the shirt on there. Don't move it, but move the graphic. And then maybe change the brightness a little bit. Print that out. After you've printed that out, leave the shirt on, position the graphic again. Play with the contrast a little bit maybe. Okay, you can see how the graphic changes on the fly for you. So if you're not happy with the default setting, always go in here and play with these brightness, contrast, and saturation levels. Saturation simply is color saturation. It's not necessarily ink saturation. So the printer's not going to lay down more ink. It's just going to distribute the ink differently to give us more pop and more vibrancy in that graphic. You can see that represented on the screen here. One unique thing with saturation, if I want to print in a grayscale, I can bring my slider all the way to the left, and now I'm in a perfect grayscale. So if you want to take your graphics from color to black and white, that's very easy to do within the RIP software. So I'll go ahead and hit the reset button. That takes me back to a default setting for everything here. And we'll talk about the transparency area here. Real quickly, notice that this says opaque. Now, I'm not going to do anything with this graphic right now. I'm going to save it for when we focus on our dark shirt prints. But just notice that it says opaque. The reason it knows that this is an opaque graphic is it's very simple. It's just seeing that it's a JPEG. If this saw it as a TIFF or a PNG, what you would see here is transparency. But right now it's a JPEG, so it's going to see it as an opaque graphic. And again, we'll talk about that later in our dark shirt section. So our next tab over is underbase. We're not going to talk about that right now, but we'll get into that real deep when we start talking about the dark shirt printing. So the next tab over from there is our preferences tab. And you can see we have a few different items that we have on display here. We have our display settings, our ink cost, and our profile. Under display, we have display units, and we have inches, centimeters, points, and millimeters. So AnaJet is an international company, and we always try to accommodate our international customers by having centimeters and millimeters available there for them. I'm just going to keep it in inches here. Our grid size, you can see we're at 1 inch by 1 inch. I can manipulate this in any way I want. I can make this 2 by 1 and click apply, and now you see that the grid has changed on my screen. I'm just going to keep this at the default setting of 1 by 1. I can choose to have my display grid shown, or I can choose to have my ruler shown or not. Very simple. Those are checked by default. Now, one thing that's very unique about our RIP software that a lot of others don't have is our ink cost. Right here is where you'll change your numbers based on the dollar amount that you spent on your ink cartridges for each color cartridge and each white cartridge. So these are retail prices as they stand today. These might change, but that's easy to change on your own. So you'll probably change this based on the amount of the retail price added to the cost of shipping, add to tax, and maybe at the end of the day, maybe we're at 68.23, and maybe we're at 79.14 for a white. Now I'm going to click apply, and you see that nothing's really happened. But the magic happens after we've ripped the file, and I'll show you what happens after we rip the file. The ink cost calculator will calculate for us how much that graphic cost us in ink to print. So I'll show you that here very soon. The next thing we have is our profile. Legacy we have checked here. By default, that should be unchecked. But what legacy is it's an option there. It's for our older customers. If they've been with us for more than over a year, I would say, at one point they were using our default ICC profile. Not the one we've just recently come up with. So if they want their colors to match their old orders, they would click this legacy button. And just a small tip for our customers, if you're printing on white shirts and you're maybe not getting the pop or the color that you're really looking for out of those shirts, go ahead and try that legacy mode and see if you're satisfied with that. I've seen a lot of people go back to legacy and they really like the results that they get. So once you have everything set here like you want it, go ahead and click the apply button, and that'll apply those settings for you. And that completes the Preferences tab section. All right, so now let's go back to our Print Settings tab, and let's get this graphic all set up for how I want it to look on my t-shirt. So right now I'm at scaling of 100%. Let's take that down to 75%, for example. And I'll position it exactly 2 inches from the top. And I'll go ahead and click Apply. And then let's center that graphic here horizontally. And now I have this file exactly how I want it to look on the shirt. Now the next thing I need to do is save all this hard work. There's no need to take notes on everything that we've done here. The RIP software has the ability to save all these settings for you. So if you go to the top here and click on File, you'll see Save Design As. So go ahead and click on Save Design As. And it's going to save this as an AJD file, an AnaJet design file. So go ahead and name your file whatever you want. I'm going to name this one Tim's Turtle. And click Save. And I'll save it to my desktop here. And so now we've saved the settings with the graphic and the graphic itself. So I'll give you an example of what's going to happen here. If we just shut down for the day, we've gone through our 100 shirts, and we close the RIP, and 3 months down the road, our customer calls us back up and says, hey, can we do a repeat order of what we've done in the past? Absolutely. So here's my Tim's Turtle design file. All I have to do is double click on that, and there's everything that I had before. There's my turtle positioned exactly how I had it. There's my settings exactly how I had them. And so it loaded the graphic in along with the settings. Very easy way to save all your hard work. Now the other way to do this is by clicking on File and saving your template. So when you click Save Template As, now this is an AnaJet template file. You'll see an AJT file. I'm just going to call this Tim's Template. And again, I'll save that to my desktop. I'll close the RIP. It's going to ask me if I want to save any changes to the AJD file that we just did. I'm going to say no in this case. All right, now let's load my template up now. So just double click on Tim's template, for example, and now notice that all the settings are there, but my graphic isn't loaded in. So that's the difference between saving your design or saving your template. When you save your design, you're saving the settings and the graphic. When you're saving a template, you're not saving the graphic along with the settings. It's strictly the settings itself. So those are the two different ways that you can save all of your hard work without having to go back and read all these copious notes that you had to take, because it's not even necessary. Very simple way to do this. All right, so now that we have our design file or our template file saved, next thing we need to do is send the job to the printer or send it to a file. So those are the two different options that we have available, and you'll see that right here. Now notice that my print button is grayed out. That means that I'm not currently directly connected to the printer. The only option I have available at this point is print to file. So let's go ahead and click on print to file. And if it's going to ask me now, do I want to save this design first? I've already saved the design, so I'm going to say no. Then it's going to ask me the job that I want to name the file. So I'll name it the default name that the graphic was named, which is Turtle. I'll click OK. I'll give it a location that I want it to save it to. In this case, I'm going to put it on my desktop. And I'll click Save. And then you'll see the progress bar pop up on our queue. Now, the queue window is where all the files are getting processed. And it gives us all the details that we need to see how that file was processed. So here's the result. It tells us it was a successful result. It gives us the job name, the timestamp that we have for a submitted date, and the runtime. How long did it take for that file to rip? Now here's the really unique thing. Remember we talked about the ink cost. Well, here it is. Here's your ink cost. So in this specific graphic, we're paying 43 cents worth of ink to print this file. And I can go into even further detail. If I go ahead and right-click on that number and click on Show Ink Cost, you can see that I have a very tight breakdown per color on my ink cost. And you can see it looks like the significant amount of the yellow was used for this file. So you can see exactly the amount in milliliters that was used per color and the cost per color as well. I'll go ahead and click OK. And let's go ahead and close this queue window. So you can see now that I have the turtle.anajet file. Now this is the actual RIP file on my desktop. So the next thing I might want to do is drag it to a USB drive or an SD card that I have plugged into my computer. So let's go ahead and bring that drive up. You can see my removable disk here. I'll double click on that, and then I'll just drag and copy that file over to the USB drive. Now you could always rip directly to the USB drive if you wanted to. Let me show you how that would happen. So right now my USB drive is currently plugged in. I can click Print to File. And rather than saving it to my desktop, I can save it directly to my removable disk here. Name it whatever I want, and then click Save. It'll rip the file directly to either the USB drive or to the SD card. The other option is to print. Now again, mine is grayed out simply because I'm not connected to the printer. So if you ever find that you're having a communication problem with the RIP software to the printer, make sure that this is not grayed out. If this is grayed out, you're never going to send that print successfully. So what happens when I do click this print? It'll give me the same option. It'll give me the question, do I want to save the design file? I either give it a yes or a no. In this case, I'll just say no. It'll ask me for a job name. And then once I click OK, it'll start to rip the file. And then what will happen is that file will show up on your LCD screen on the control panel of the printer, usually within about 5 to 10 seconds after I've clicked print. Wait for that job to process completely, and then go ahead and load your t-shirt, and then hit the print button on the control panel of the printer, and you'll have your first print. When it comes to printing and saving your work, there's two different ways to save your jobs. Number one, once you have the RIP software open and you have your image all set up exactly how you want it, you can send that job directly to the printer by hitting the print button on the RIP software. This is a direct line from your computer to your printer. Once you hit the print button, what you'll see is your thumbnail of your graphic will pop up on your control panel, and at that point, the green light under your print button should illuminate. From there, just hit the print button and your job will be ready to print. The other way to go is by writing the jobs to an SD card or to a USB drive. Once it's written to the USB drive or the SD card, simply plug that into the side of the control panel, access those from the Jobs button on the control panel, find the file that you ripped, and then you'll see that it's loaded in and it's ready to print. So let's start talking about how to load a shirt onto your AnaJet mPower. First of all, we have a table hoop that's here, and we'll take that off. Now the table hoop is used to help keep the shirt taut and straight when we put it on the table. So I'm going to set this aside temporarily. I'm going to pull my t-shirt off here. Now before I place it on the table, I want to make note of these center points that we have throughout on the 4 different points of the table. Top and bottom are my vertical center points, left or right are my horizontal. So when I throw the shirt on here, I'm going to use those as my center points and actually feel those cutouts. That'll give me an indication on how centered I am with the shirt and the table. So I also have a hole that's located on my table hoop that is also the center point. So when I place the table hoop on and around the shirt and onto the table, I can now see that I'm completely centered. Now after that, you're probably going to see some wrinkles in your shirt. Don't be discouraged by this. It's an easy fix. All we're going to have to do is pull the shirt from the edges underneath the table hoop to work those wrinkles out. Now obviously I don't want you to go too far with this. Don't pull the shirt so tight that you're going to start to stretch it out. You want it just enough so you work some of those wrinkles out. So here we are. We got our shirt all loaded in. We have everything tucked under the tray here. We have our job loaded in. And we're ready to print. So let's go ahead and hit the print button. I know that's ready, by the way, by looking at the ready button. You can see that's illuminated here for us. So let's go ahead and print our first light shirt of the day. All right, so here we are at the heat press, and it appears that I've done something wrong. The graphic is actually facing the wrong direction. If I put this down on the heat press right now, the wet ink is not facing the right direction. It needs to be facing the heating element of the heat press. So let's go ahead and turn this shirt around. And well, that didn't really work for me either, because now I've transferred ink from the printed area to an area that I didn't want to have any ink at all. Keep in mind that the ink is always wet until it's completely cured. So proper handling of the shirts from the printer to the heat press is essential to keep this from happening. So let's go ahead and put this on the heat press the right way. And as I get down here, you'll see I try to get all the wrinkles out of the shirt. if I can. And then I'm going to take my craft paper, and when I place the craft paper onto the shirt, notice I don't drag it on. If I were to drag this on, I'm going to transfer ink into other areas again. So what I do is I just let this craft paper hover and just let it fall. Just let it drape down on top of the garment. Then we'll take our handle here, press it down for a medium pressure, and let that cure at 330 degrees for 90 seconds. Now it's a white shirt, so I could also let it cure for 356 degrees for 40 seconds. So I'm cutting 50 seconds out of my production time by doing that. And that's how you cure the white shirts. Okay, you saw the sign, right? Stop. This is a warning. We always want to encourage our customers to understand. If you don't learn anything from this video today, at least take this one bit of information with you. And that is, the worst thing that you can do for your printer is to leave ink sitting in it and powering it down. Now, why is that so important to leave the power on? If you don't have your printer powered on, the recirculating ink system within the printer cannot operate. Very important. That circulating system is moving your ink every hour that that printer sits idle. So if you stop printing at 3 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, you'll hear that cycle kick on. Now, why do we have to keep ink moving? If you think about it, it's like your bloodstream in your body. We have our heart pumping constantly. If our heart were to stop, we all know the outcome of that. Same thing with the pumps inside the system. If those pumps stop, we could have an outcome that's very similar. Make sure your printer is on 24 hours a day. Very important. All right, so if we understand what causes clogging, we can also help prevent it. Within a white ink is a pigment called titanium dioxide. Now, titanium dioxide is used in many different capacities. You might find it in your coffee creamers. You might also find it in some suntan lotions or any kind of fluid or liquid that a company has to manufacture to make it appear white. So, with that said, titanium dioxide inside of our inks and our water-based inks will separate over time. And if it's allowed to separate, what happens is you'll have a layer of white and a layer of water inside your tubes, and that layer of water will eventually evaporate, leaving the pigment behind. The pigment that's left behind is what creates that clogging sensation. So how long can I leave ink inside my printer without even having to maintain it? If you leave your printer idle for more than 2 weeks, we always recommend flushing the entire system out. And we'll go over that flushing system very shortly here. In the meantime, if you're going to leave the printer for more than 2 weeks, understand that when you come back to that printer after 2 weeks, you're probably going to have about 30 to 45 minutes of maintenance ahead of you. That's not uncommon. Take your time, do your nozzle checks, do your head cleans, and make sure that you get that printer back up and running at 100%, so you see 100% on your nozzle checks. For your mPower, we do have a required maintenance schedule. We have daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and every 3 month schedules for you. Daily is going to consist of doing your nozzle checks and head cleans, and also agitating those white ink cartridges just by pulling them out, giving them a quick shake, and placing them back inside the printer. Weekly is going to consist of cleaning your maintenance station, cleaning your wiper blade, and cleaning the bottom of the print head plates. Bi-weekly, you're going to check your left and your right waste pads. You're also going to check the waste ink tank. Monthly, you're going to check the wiper blade for wear. You're also going to check the wiper blade holder track to make sure that that track is nice and clean and free of any debris or ink buildup. And then every 3 months, we also encourage you to flush your entire system. So this is very important for the ink delivery system to maintain and also to keep it flushed out. So when you flush the system, let it sit over a day, maybe even 2 days. A good weekend while you're not in production, then come back and reintroduce ink when you're ready for production. So when it comes to your maintenance schedule, keep in mind that you can never over-maintain your printer. The daily, weekly, monthly maintenance that we already have set aside for you, that's a bare minimum. We at least want you to do that much and get in a good habit of it. But if you're doing high production runs on a daily basis, you can never over-maintain your printer. In fact, we would encourage you to over-maintain the printer. So good maintenance is a good habit to get into. It's going to make sure that you're successful with your printer every day that you go into production. Every AnaJet printer that's sold comes with its own maintenance kit. You'll see foam swabs, lint-free cloths, and our own cleaning solution. The first step to maintaining your printer will be to release the head carriage. In order to do this, click on Menu at the top on your control panel, scroll down to Maintenance Functions, scroll down to Print Carriage Control, and then select Release Carriage. At this point, you'll see the carriage move away from the maintenance station on the left-hand side and move all the way to the far right-hand side of the printer. Now that the printhead carriage is moved all the way to the right-hand side of the printer, it is now safe to lift the lid. Notice that the carriage is free to move left and right using your hands manually. We always do, though, recommend leaving the carriage over the right-hand side pads in case there are any ink drops that are falling off the printheads. Now grab one of your lint-free foam swabs, take it out of the bag, and moisten it with the cleaning solution that's in your cup. Now take that swab and clean the white gaskets of the maintenance station. These will be the ones that are on your far right-hand side. If you're an MP10 owner, you'll have 2 of these gaskets. If you're an MP5 owner, you'll only have 1. Clean these gaskets until you no longer see any white ink on those gaskets and you see just pure black rubber. In some cases, there might be such a big buildup of white ink that it could form a skin on those gaskets. If that's the case, you could possibly try to pull those manually with your fingers. The reason that we have to clean these gaskets is because if we don't, we could lose seal and we could lose pressure on our vacuum sealed system. So it's very, very important to maintain these gaskets on a weekly basis. And remember, you can never over-maintain your printer. Once you've cleaned the gaskets off with your swab, now grab a lint-free cloth and get any excess ink that may have fallen on the platform below the gaskets. It's a good way to maintain your maintenance station and make sure that everything is clean as possible. Now grab another foam swab and use this one to clean the 4 color gaskets. Make sure that there's no buildup of ink skin that is dried up on those gaskets. Remember, they have to be clean in order to maintain proper seal to the printheads. This is the only thing protecting your printheads from the environment and the elements around it while it's not printing. And here you can see the maintenance station is completely clean. The gaskets are all clean. All ink has been taken off of them. And this is what a properly maintained maintenance station platform should look like. In order to clean your wiper blade, you have to take it out from its holder. To do so, just grab the wiper blade and pull it straight up. You will now see that the wiper blade has been released from its holder. With your lint-free cloth, clean off the wiper blade of all residue and all ink. You'll know you have a clean wiper blade when you see dull rubber. If you see any shininess or ink buildup, that's not a good sign. Keep cleaning until you see a dull rubber blade. The wiper blade maintenance is extremely critical. If the wiper blade is streaking across your printhead because it's dirty, it's going to leave streaks behind and possibly lead to bad nozzle checks. So it's very important to maintain your wiper blade as often as possible. It's possible that if you let your wiper blade go 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even a month without any maintenance, that you'll see a major skin form across the front of that wiper blade. Make sure you peel all ink and all residue off. Once the blade is clean, go ahead and place it back inside the holder. Notice that there's a sharp edge to the wiper blade. That sharp edge must be facing to the left-hand side of the printer or facing the maintenance station. If it's placed in backwards, this will lead to poor head cleans. I can't emphasize it enough. Make sure that that sharp edge is facing to the left-hand side of the printer. Now that it's placed back inside its holder, give it a short little tug and make sure that it's seated properly. If it comes out in your hand, reseat it. If you tug on it and it feels snug, it's placed in properly. Now it's time to clean our printhead plates and our printheads. One tool that we really recommend getting is a mirror. Placing this down inside the front of the printer will greatly help you understand and see what you're doing underneath that printhead carriage. Once you've placed your mirror down, grab one of your lint-free cloths and saturate it with our cleaning solution. Using the mirror as your guide, go ahead and clean that printhead plate of all ink and all residue. Remember, if there's a significant buildup of ink on your printhead plate, this could lead to smearing during head cleans and also during printing, so make sure that we clean all ink and all residue off the bottom of this printhead plate. This printhead plate has been covered with a Teflon coating to make it much easier to maintain during the week. Now that your printheads and printhead plate have been completely cleaned with our cleaning solution and lint-free cloth, it's now time to secure the printhead. It should be in that same menu. Just scroll down to Secure Printhead and hit Enter. You'll now see the printhead carriage move from the right and seal over the maintenance station on the left-hand side. Just as white ink can settle in your tubes if it's not moving, white ink can also settle in the cartridges. It's never a bad idea to pull your cartridges every couple days and agitate them, and then just place them back inside the printer. This will assure that we have no ink separation in our cartridges, so we're not introducing separated ink into the system. The next thing we need to do is check the maintenance of our waste ink pads. There's actually 2 of them located on the printer. One on the left-hand side underneath the maintenance station, and one on the right-hand side of the printer. The first one we'll talk about is underneath your maintenance station. In order to gain access to these pads, you'll need to unscrew the 2 Phillip head screws. Once these are unscrewed, pull the tray out and it will reveal the pads. These pads can be rinsed out under a sink or just replaced. Once you've replaced or washed these pads, go ahead and place them back inside the tray and place the tray back underneath the maintenance station. This pad is used to absorb any ink that is run off the wiper blade during all head cleans. The next thing we'll check is the right-hand side waste ink pad. This pad is used to absorb any ink that is used while the print heads are priming themselves before any prints, whether it's a nozzle check or just an everyday print that you're performing. Over time, this pad will absorb a high amount of ink. Take the pad out, either rinse it under a sink or replace if needed. Place the pad back inside the tray and your maintenance for your pads are done. Next we have our waste ink tank. Anytime you perform printhead cleans, the maintenance station pump will then pump the ink over to the waste ink tank. Over time, this will fill up. We have a sensor at the top that will give you an indication on your control panel when this tank is full. Next, we'll show you how to drain this tank. Every AnaJet printer is provided with its own waste ink tank drain tube. The drain tube on the mPower is located underneath the right-hand side waste pad. Grab the bag, open it up, and pull out the drain tube. Now we'll go to the back of the printer. At the back of the printer, you'll find a coupling that this tube will plug into. But before that, make sure that the other end of the tube is in some sort of container to catch any ink that might fall out of the drain. The way this works is just a simple siphoning effect. If, however, you plug the tube into the back of the printer and you do not see any drainage immediately, go inside the printer and tilt the tank forward. This should assist the siphoning effect. It is also recommended that every 2 weeks we take the printhead carriage rail and lubricate it with synthetic oil. Release your printhead carriage. After you've released the printhead carriage, now apply the synthetic oil to the rail. Then take your printhead carriage and manually move it left and right. This will assure that the oil has been applied evenly. It's also important to inspect the encoder strip of the printer every couple weeks. Sometimes some ink will form on there, sometimes some lint will form on there. When it comes to cleaning your encoder strip, you'll need a 50% solution of water and the other 50% solution of alcohol. Grab one of your lint-free cloths, moisten it with the solution, and then pinch the encoder strip. Once pinched, clean it left to right over the entire encoder strip. You will have to release the printhead in order to get the entire encoder strip clean. Okay, so let's talk about how ink actually moves through the system. Number one is through the piezo crystal mechanism inside your printhead. Basically what's happening is those crystals is receiving a charge. It's receiving tension and then eventually compression, and that compression is what fires the ink through the nozzle plate and eventually onto your substrate. Now this is happening anytime you're doing any kind of form of printing or even just a simple nozzle check. The other way that ink moves through the system is through the pump mechanism that's on the maintenance station. So anytime you do printhead cleans or fills or flushes is how we're moving ink through the system. Basically, the maintenance station is latching onto the bottom of the printhead and drawing ink through the nozzles. And that's how we move ink through the system. The AnaJet mPower printer has a very unique self-maintaining system that will run when the printer is not being used. Once an hour, the ink will circulate through the ink tubes and the printhead will quickly fire. This always keeps ink flowing without the use of automated printhead cleans, which can be wasteful. Remember, always keep the power running on your printer 24 hours a day to complete this automated cycle. Alright, so when it comes to some basic troubleshooting and some tips that we can give you, we're going to go over banding, we're going to go over fuzzy prints, maybe you see some strange colors in your printing also, and we're going to talk about, of course, image resolution, which is very important. So let's start with banding, okay? First off, if you see banding in your print, it's an indication that nozzles either are not firing or they're partially blocked. It's usually going to be the latter of that too. If you see banding, first thing I'm going to do is stop my print and perform a nozzle check. Let's see who the culprit is of these problems. Maybe it's one channel, maybe it's 3 channels, but we don't know until we perform that nozzle check. Now, of course, if you've done your maintenance normally, you do the nozzle check before your print jobs. So remember that. Always perform a nozzle check before you start any production. If you know you have a good nozzle check going in, you probably shouldn't have any problems with banding later. If your humidity levels are too low, this could also cause banding. So if you're printing that first, second shirt and it looks wonderful, but that third shirt's not coming out as you expect, and the fourth one, it gets worse, fifth one, it gets even worse than that, make sure your humidity levels are up above 45%. That'll help get rid of any banding that you might have. Also, performing head cleans will also get rid of any banding that you might have. So remember, we have the 3 different types of head cleans. Number 1, for the white channels only. Number 2, a light head cleaning. And then number 3, a heavy head cleaning. So your nozzle check will dictate which one you'll need to do first. So let's talk about fuzzy prints. Now, fuzzy printing, maybe where you see sharp edges in your graphic that are starting to blur or look a little fuzzy, is an indication that your table heights are too low. So how do we cure that? Well, first thing we need to take care of is make sure we hit our height adjustment button on our control panel. That'll get you the optimal table height for your prints. Generally, when tables are too low, it's because we've gone from one substrate to another. So let's suppose we printed hoodie sweatshirts the night before, and then we went straight into t-shirts the next day. Probably forgot to hit that height adjustment button, so just remember to do that. All right, so let's talk about color modes, specifically RGB versus CMYK. All of the files that you should send to your AnaJet should be in the RGB file spectrum. The reason for that is because it's a more broad spectrum. You can see in the graphic on the left-hand side that the colors are much more broad. You have a much more wide spectrum of color to work with than you do with CMYK. If you look at the photograph on your right-hand side of the lady, you'll see that she looks a little bit sick, a little bit doled out on the right-hand side photo. On the left-hand side, however, much more vivid print, much more true skin tones. So always use the RGB color spectrum when you're printing your graphics. If you see strange colors in your graphics, maybe your greens are turning to blue or your purples are turning to a red, always look at that file and make sure that it is RGB. If it is CMYK, you should see some colors shifting in that graphic. So again, make sure you're using the RGB color mode. So let's talk about communication errors again. Remember, it could be one of these 3 things. Number 1, you just haven't turned the power switch on. Make sure you have both of them turned on. There's one in the back and there's also one on the control panel. Number 2, could be just a cable that's too long. If it's over 10 feet, you're going to lose communication. Number 3, if the cable's not plugged in properly, you'll see that. Just make sure you check both ends of that cable, make sure it's plugged in properly to your computer and to your printer. All right, remember again, when it comes to your printer environment, try to keep your temperatures above 61 degrees, but below 90 degrees. Remember my rule of thumb, if I'm comfortable in the room, it's probably likely that my AnaJet's going to be comfortable as well. Biggest criteria though is your humidity. Again, I can't stress enough, 45% is the bare minimum. I don't want to go to the bare minimum though. I want to try to go over 45% if that's possible. And so that's where the tools of the trade come in. Getting a hygrometer, getting a humidifier in that room, and if the room's too big for that humidifier to fill with humid air, make sure we condense that room, make that room smaller, and do whatever we can to help control that environment so that we constantly have over 45% humidity. Also, one quick tip, make sure your heat presses aren't too close to your printers. If the heat press is too close to the printer, keep in mind it's emitting warm air constantly. And if it's too close to the printer, it could be introducing dry air. So get that heat press at least 4 feet away from your printer. In order to be successful with your dark shirt printing, there's nothing more important than understanding how to pre-treat your shirts properly. So let's talk about that. What is pretreatment? Pretreatment is a bonding agent for your white ink to not settle through your shirt, but sit up on top of your shirt. If you take a pre-treated shirt and print it with white ink, you'll see that white ink will just settle right on the top layer. But if you took a shirt that was not pre-treated, you would slowly start to see that ink sink right into the garment, yielding really poor results. If you were to print color on top of that white, your colors would not be true, they would not be vivid. So we need to have that pretreatment applied. So what are the required tools to apply the pretreatment? Number 1 is a Wagner sprayer, which is provided with every AnaJet printer that we sell. It's a high volume, low pressure system, and that's very important. If it wasn't low pressure, we would be shooting pretreatment right through that shirt. We don't want to do that. So we're getting a high quantity of pretreatment on the garment without shooting through the shirt. When it comes to drying your pretreated shirts, there's more than a few ways to do it. How we do it here at AnaJet, we simply hang them on a line. Southern California sun, you gotta love it, right? The other way to do it is with a flash dryer or a conveyor dryer. Now the criteria for this is just to make sure that the shirt is completely dry by the time it reaches the end of the belt. If there's any dampness, you'll have to reinsert it back through the system to get it dried. Then, once the shirt's dried, here's the beauty. Endless life. You can pull that shirt out 10 years from now and it's still a very good pretreated shirt for production. So there's no lifespan, there's no lifetime to be able to use that shirt. So a lot of customers actually create an inventory of pretreated shirts for themselves ahead of time so they're not doing it on the fly per order, which is a great thing to do. So welcome to the pretreatment area here at AnaJet headquarters. You can see the setup is very simple. I have a table placed in a corner. I have my Wagner sprayer. I have my stack of shirts, and I have my trusty card squeegee here. So when it comes to your pretreatment, what I've seen a lot of customers do that fail on pretreatment, they end up putting less than is what is actually necessary. So I want to try to get as much information to you guys as I can, so make sure you're successful with your white ink prints. So the first thing I want to show is how much pretreatment we actually put on a t-shirt in order for it to print well. So let me demonstrate this for you. I have my Wagner sprayer, and I have my trigger set up so it falls all the way to the back. And don't be shy with this trigger. Give it all it can go. First thing I want to tell you is let your eye be the judge on when you start and stop pretreating. When I start, I usually start at the top left shoulder, and I'll work my way to the right side, come back down, come back across. One thing to try to do is to try to avoid the collar from getting pretreated. The pretreatment has a tendency to make the shirts feel stiff or starched. The idea is to try not to get the collar so that customers' first wear doesn't have a starchy feel. So we'll try to get as much information as we can to you, and we'll try to get it to where you can see how much saturation is actually placed on this shirt. Please make sure to always follow the instructions and the safety instructions that come with your AnaJet pretreatment bottles. You can see I have protective eyewear, a respirator, and some gloves while I'm doing my pretreatment. We always want to make sure our customers are safe and well protected. First thing I want to really emphasize is that your eye is going to be your best judge on when you have enough pretreatment deposited on that shirt. So what am I looking for? I'm actually looking for a grayish cast or sheen to fall across the front of the shirt. So with my Wagner sprayer in hand, I'm going to start at the top left corner of that shirt and avoid the collar. The reason we want to avoid the collar is because the pretreatment will have a starchy feel to it once it's dried. We'd hate to have our customer have that starchy feel on their collar. Please remember that the only criteria for having to place pretreatment on a shirt is if you're going to use white ink. Doesn't matter what the color of the garment is. It could be a white garment, a black garment, a red garment. Doesn't matter. If you intend on putting white ink on it, it will need pretreatment applied. Notice as I spray the shirt with the Wagner sprayer that I'm about 2 inches from the shirt. This is very important. If you're too high, you're just going to be wasting pretreatment, and it's going to take forever to pretreat that shirt properly. So make sure you get the gun just about 2 inches from the top of the shirt. Notice the difference in the amount of pretreatment that's applied when the gun is far away rather than close up to the shirt. If I'm spraying too far away from the shirt, I'm not applying nearly as much pretreatment, yielding really poor results with our white ink. Please remember that you cannot pretreat both sides of the shirt at the same time. What we recommend is pretreating either the front or the back first, letting that dry, and then applying pretreatment to the opposite side and let that dry. Now that garment is ready for printing. Please remember that it's very important not to apply direct heat to your wet pretreated shirts. The result will be glazing. This is a permanent phenomenon and something that you cannot wash out. Once it's there permanently. So to let the shirts dry, remember, hang dry it, line dry it, flash dry it, or use a conveyor dryer. Just make sure that the shirt is completely dry before print. Now hopefully you can see that there's quite a bit of shine that's built up on that shirt. That's my indication that I have enough pretreatment deposited on that garment. So my eye is the best judge that I have to tell me when do I need to stop pretreating a shirt. The next thing I have to do is take my card squeegee and work the pretreatment into the garment, going in only one direction. And I usually go down I work the pretreatment into the garment. That shirt's ready to dry. Now remember, there's different techniques to drying. You can line dry it outside, you can use a conveyor dryer, flash dryer, or in some cases you can use your heat press, but keep in mind you can't use direct pressured heat on your wet pre-treated shirts. You can only use the hover technique for this. Dark shirt printing with the AnaRIP software. I'm going to go ahead and open up the AnaRIP software, and I'm going to open up my graphics folder and select a folder out of my dark shirt graphics. And, let's just drag and drop the Bobcat in there. Expand my window. So right now you can see that we don't have any white ink enabled, and I know that because there's no checkbox on my enable white ink. So let's go ahead and check that box, and the next thing you'll see is that the underbase tab is now selected automatically for us, and we're also looking at a preview of the white ink underbase. So from the top, let's start on content-based printing. And what is content-based printing? Content-based printing is checked by default. And what it is doing is it's interpreting the graphic, and it's looking for the dark colors and the light colors within that graphic. Wherever it sees darker colors, it's going to lay down less white ink. Where it sees brighter colors, it's going to lay down more white ink. And the great thing about this content-based printing and this style of printing is that it helps our customers save at least 40 to 60% in ink cost for their white inks. It's pretty significant, and it's a really good way to go as far as the look of the shirt as well, because to me, when you print in a content-based print, the shirt looks better. It looks like it's a higher quality print. With a non-content-based print, and I'll show you how that looks, you can see that we're putting white under the entire graphic, and this is a significant amount of white ink that you don't really need to spend money on. You're going to get just as good a print in a content-based mode as you would with this, with a non-content-based. However, what you'll also see is that your prints in a non-content base almost look like they're an iron-on print. They don't any longer look like they're part of the garment. They look like they've been slapped on that shirt. I'd rather have a nice soft hand and a nice soft look to my garment by the time I'm done with the graphics. So always start with the default of the content-based print. Next item down is our underbase settings. And just as we had control over the quality and the variable dot range on the CMYK, we have the same control under our whites. So by default, we have our fine. We also have draft and speed. I would always at least start with fine. Then we have our variable dot range. You see we have narrow and we have wide here. I would always stick with narrow as the default setting. If you go to a wide on your white underbase with a fine setting, you're probably going to see your white ink start to puddle up, and you're going to have to wait a while for the white ink to settle before you lay the color layer down on top of that. So keep the default settings that we have here for you under fine and narrow. We also have control of the bidirectional printing. Again, bidirectional meaning that the print heads are firing while the print head is moving to the left and to the right. If you're looking for finer detail in your white underbases, you can uncheck this, but remember, it doubles your production time. So the next item down, and this is where some of the magic happens, is our underbase adjustments. We talked earlier about our view section, and we talked significantly about true view. So I'd have another option here that I didn't have before: color, underbase, and true view. So let's go ahead and click on that. And what you're looking at is three different views of this graphic. The first one on the left is the graphic as it is, unedited. The one in the middle is our content-based underbase preview. So this is what your underbase will look like when it's printed out. And then on the right-hand side, we have the graphic as it would look in true view on a dark shirt. So now the key to getting our graphic on the right-hand side to look like the one on the left-hand side is all about adjusting the white ink underbase. Remember, color needs white under it to be completely true. The less white you have under the color, the more it's going to shift, more that color is actually going to change on us. So let me show you through the underbase adjustments how we can make the Bobcat on the right look significantly more like the one on the left, but still stay in a content-based mode. Because if you look, if I take content-based off, you'll see that now they're identical. But again, I don't want to print all of this white ink. It's going to cost me a lot of money per shirt. All right, so let's talk about color contrast. Now this slider will change the colors. So let's talk about color contrast. This slider will change the white ink underbase and how much white is laid down under the colors. So if you move your slider to the right, you're going to be laying down more white ink, and you can see that actually change live on your screen. If we move it to the left, it's going to be less ink. So it's really up to you. My personal preference when it comes to color contrast, I normally push this all the way up to 100, just as a good starting point. Now, opacity contrast. This graphic has a very fine feathered edge to it. If I want that edge to be soft, I can change my opacity contrast. It's basically looking at what we call a transparent gradient. These are pixels that are semi-transparent. They're not completely opaque at 100%. And so what we're doing is we're looking to change how soft or how hard that edge is on that graphic. So in the case of the Bobcat, if I move the opacity contrast up, it's going to soften those edges. If I bring it down, it's going to harden those edges a little bit. So you can see that live on your screen. Play with this as you see fit. Adjust this setting as you see fit. Maybe do some test prints with the graphics scaled down a little bit to see how well that feathered edge comes out. I can load a different graphic in here for you that has a really good outer glow to it. Let's bring this motorcycle rider in here. This is a really good example. I'll scale this up quite a bit for you so you can see the outer glow that we've put on here. I'm going to enable my white ink again. And as I shift the opacity contrast, so as you can see on this graphic, it has a very good outer glow to it. If I go to my color view, you can see that blue outline that we have on around this dirt bike rider. So what I want to do is adjust that outer glow. Maybe I want to have a little bit harder edge to it, or maybe I want to have a little bit of a softer edge to it. That's where the opacity contrast will come into play. If I could go back to my underbase layer, and as I move the slider to the right-hand side, you'll see that that edge will get a little bit more harsh, a little bit more crisp. And maybe that's what you're looking for, but maybe you're also looking for it to get softer around that edge and feather into the shirt. Go ahead and move that slider to the left. You'll see how that changes. So this is what the opacity contrast slider is doing for us. It's just changing those pixels that are part of a transparent gradient and either giving them a harder edge or a softer edge. I'll go ahead and hit reset there. And let's go ahead and load that Bobcat back in. All right, and I'll go back to my color, underbase, and true view setting. And we had already put the color contrast at 100. Opacity contrast, again, we just talked about that with the dirt bike rider and how that changes the outer glows or the transparent pixels around the edge of a graphic that we want to fade into the shirt. The next setting down is our choke setting. Now the choke setting is there to help us compensate for any white ink swelling. It's a natural occurrence that when we lay a white ink underbase down, that on the shirt it will physically expand just a slight bit. So what we're actually doing when we choke a graphic is we're taking pixels away from the outer portion of the white underbase for that graphic. So let's say, for example, we had a red circle, just a perfect red circle, and we lay a white ink underbase down, and then we send it back in for the color, and we see the red come out, but then we see a very fine white outline around the red. Now, that wasn't part of the graphic. That white outline is that white ink that is swelled up. So to compensate for that, we can move the choke up just slightly. If you choke a graphic out too much, you may see things disappear. If you're dealing with text that's very small, if we choke those fine pixels out too much, we might have it disappear altogether. So there's a fine line between choking something out too much or not enough. So play with this setting, get a good feel for how it works. I usually start at a choke of 2 as a default for myself. Your results may be different based on the graphics that you're working with. Now let's talk about the next setting down, which is a groundbreaker for AnaJet. And this is something that we came up with. A lot of times our graphics were not able to manipulate the underbase exactly how we wanted. We had full color contrast control, but we didn't have control over specific colors, and now we do. So you can see with this drop down, we have reds, greens, blues, cyans, magentas, yellows, and grays. On this specific graphic, and you have to understand color and color theory to really get a good grasp of this, but it's pretty easy if I show you. What you're looking at, and I'll start with the reds. Let's look at the nose of the Bobcat, and let's look at the Great Dane graphics logo there. Now you can see the difference between the graphic on the left-hand side to the right-hand side, and I want that Great Dane graphic, that red, to look more of a blood red instead of a maroon red that I see on the right-hand side here. So I'm going to take my reds, select those, and when I move this slider up to the right-hand side, I'm adding more white underneath the red. And as I release, you'll see that I'm starting to make that red pop off. It's coming to life. And not only did it change the red in the Great Dane graphics logo, but it also changed some of the features on the Bobcat itself. Now I see some other colors in the Bobcat. I see some yellows in the fur. So maybe I want to go down here and select my yellows and change how much white is under my yellow. And as I move this up, we start to see that this graphic's starting to come to life in our True View section. Maybe I want to change a little bit of the greens. Maybe we want to make those eyes a little bit more green on the True View. So let's bring our greens up. All right, so now this graphic's starting to look pretty good. I think we're at the point where we can get this dialed in and almost ready to print. The last thing we want to talk about here is our pure white. Now, anytime you see a graphic with pure white, such as the AnaJet logo here, it's going to print 100% pure white for you. However, we have the ability to throttle that white. So if you want that white to be only, let's say 90%, you can throttle that down all the way to 90%, or maybe even down to 30%. And you can see that how that AnaJet logo has now changed its opacity. So again, you have full control of the throttle of the white. All right, so once I've got that graphic dialed in, it's time to print. So again, you can either print to the file, or you can print directly to your AnaJet printer and then pull the graphic up at the control panel. All right, so one other thing we didn't talk about was the transparency section here under our color adjustments. So with this graphic, remember before in the turtle we saw that it was opaque. In this graphic we have transparency. I want to show you how we can actually knock a background out of a graphic in our RIP software, which is very unique for RIP software. Most RIP softwares are not made to really alter our graphics at all. They're just made to position them, scale them, and then print them. With the AnaRIP software, however, we have the full ability to knock out a solid color background. So let's take the turtle again. And we've got our white ink enabled. We have content-based printing. I'll hit the reset button so we can get that to a good starting point. And of course, content-based is where I want to be with this as a good starting point. If I uncheck content-based, you can see exactly what I'm going to print out, which is going to be a solid white block. Very unattractive looking print and very costly to you at the end of the day. So start with content-based. But now we see that we have this white background that's kind of given my graphic a blocky look, which I don't want. So let's get rid of that blocky look. Under my color adjustments, we have the transparency here, and it's showing us that this graphic is indeed opaque. Now I have two options. I have select color, and I have select border color. If I do a select color, it's going to take any aspect of that color that I choose and knock it out. In this case, I want to knock white out. So if I knocked white out on the outer edge, it's also going to knock the white out on the AnaJet logo. So let's try that. So you can see I clicked on white and it took all white pixels out. And this only took out the pure white pixels. So what you're going to see is a very rough outer edge and And that's because those pixels that are left behind are not pure white. Those are actually shades of gray and very light grays. So below the select color option, we have a color tolerance slider, which will allow us to select the lighter grays within that graphic. So let's slide that up. I'll put it all the way to 10 to try to give you guys the best effect here. You can see that soften the edges up significantly. Now, is this the best way to alter your graphic? Probably not, but you can do it on a very quick scale within the RIP software. Let's load that graphic back up again, and I want to show you how you can do it with just selecting the border color. All right, let's expand that window, and now instead of doing select color, we're going to select our border color. So let's go there. Again, you'll see that little color eyedrop icon come up on your screen. Click on white. And now you can see it only selected the white pixels on the outer portion of the graphic. I'll take my color tolerance slider all the way to 10. And now you can see we have a much softer feathered edge around our graphic. Again, probably not the best way to go about doing this. I would try to load the file into Photoshop if possible and knock the solid color backgrounds out that way. But this is a quick alternative for you if you're on the fly and need to get an order out really quick. So here I am with my first black shirt of the day. I've got it loaded in, I've got the table hoop on, I have it tucked in the tray, and of course I've got this pre-treated, and because it was a pre-treated shirt, I pressed it for 5 seconds before I placed it onto the printer. So I've got my Bobcat graphic loaded in here. I can see that with the thumbnail, and my ready light's lit up. So let's go ahead and get the first print done. So what I want you to pay attention to is the first thing you'll see is that a white underbase is getting laid down. On this specific print, we used what we call a content base. If it was a non-content base, what you would see is just a solid white underbase being laid down. However, with the content-based printing, what you'll see is almost a grayscale of the graphic to begin with. Whenever we're doing content-based printing, the RIP software is going, okay, wherever I see darker colors, let's lay down less white ink. And wherever I see brighter colors, lighter colors, let's lay down more white ink. And you'll see that in the first underbase pass here. After the underbase is complete, the printer will automatically go back in for the color pass, and then the shirt will be completed. Next thing we have to do is take the shirt off of the printer and then take it over to the heat press to cure it. Now once the shirt's cured, it's ready for wash. A shirt that's not cured, however, and cured properly with the right temperatures and the right time, is a shirt that's going to disintegrate very fast in the wash cycle. So let's take the shirt off and we'll walk it over the heat press. Oh, you still there? Okay, so I want you to see, I actually did this wrong. The graphic is now facing away from me. If I were to walk over to the heat press right now, I'm going to put that graphic facing down rather than up to the heat element. So let's show you the technique that's proper to get this done. I'll put the shirt back on, and it's always been sort of cheesy, but we do call it the Olay technique, and that's where we cross our arms in front of the printer, pull the shirt off, and now magically the graphic is facing me. And as I walk over to the heat press, it's now facing the right direction. So let's go over to the heat press. All right, so straight from the printer over to the heat press, and I have it facing the right direction this time. I learned from the last time. So let's lay the shirt down onto the heat press. Same technique as before, just keeping it as wrinkle-free as we can. Now, on your dark shirts, there's a little bit different technique that you would use. If you happen to notice that your ink is very glossy, which means it's very wet, there's a technique we call the hover technique. That's where you'll take your heating element of your heat press and just hover that heating element right over the ink of the garment. You want to do this for about 10 to 15 seconds. Now, as I'm curing this, I want to explain exactly why we need to do this. If you think about it, we have two layers of ink. We have white and we have color, and they're stacked on top of each other like this. If I were to immediately press this shirt, what would happen is my white will pop up into my color, and my color will fall down into my white, and our colors are not going to be as vivid as they should be. So by creating almost what we call a skin on top for the color, that means the white can't pop through, the color can't pop into the white, and we now have more vivid prints for that. I'm going to take my craft paper, same technique as before. Instead of dragging this onto the garment, I'm going to let it fall. Just let it drape. Same thing, medium pressure. And because this is a dark garment, we're going to do it for 330 degrees for 90 seconds. After the clock is run down, I'll take the shirt out, and that's now a garment that I can sell and wash time after time. All right, so remember the golden rule. Always use the minimal amount of white ink that's commercially acceptable. If your customer's happy with the print and you're happy with the print and you saved money on your white ink because of that content-based setting, nothing wrong with that, everybody's happy. So, content-based, remember why we developed it. It's to help you save costs on your white ink. Okay, so here we are. We've reached the conclusion of AnaJet University Online. Thanks for watching today. We know that you're taking it serious when you watch us online or when you come in here for training. You spent a lot of money on your printer, you should know how to operate it, and hopefully by now, you've got a pretty good grasp of what you're doing. If you ever run into a snag, feel free to call tech support. Those guys know their stuff and they're really going to be able to help you out if you're in a fix. Also, don't forget maintenance. Let's get into good habits with our maintenance. Remember, you can never over-maintain your printer, so if you want to maintain it every day, feel free. Don't forget, feel free to contact us anytime if you have any questions, tips, tricks, or information that you'd like to share with us, or maybe even a suggestion. We always love to hear from our customers. Also, don't forget to join us for additional online training videos that we'll be producing here in the near future. They'll contain some more advanced techniques and tricks that we didn't show you in this initial course. Again, thank you for joining us.